United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Okay. And we have the roll call, please.
Croner,
Here.
Stanton, Curran,
Here.
Engel, Manny,
Here.
Gatto, Gray,
Here.
Augustiniak, Shaw.
Present. Okay, we have a quorum,
There'll be Bryant on there.
and we are in
both.
session.
Okay. Bryant, are you there?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay, good. Is Brian there too? Is it just you or is Brian also?
No, it's just me. Brian was not able to break away from his previous commitment nor provide me with another designer.
Okay, that's
Only-
okay. All right, well, we just got started, so we're gonna go through one more thing and then we'll start with your item.
Okay, very good. Thank you.
Good evening. Thank you for joining us. We'll get with you guys in just a second. This is Ken Shaw, Chairman of the Plan Commission. We need a roll call, please. Or, I'm sorry, we just did that. Thank you. Any communication from staff?
No, sir.
Okay. Next item on here is approval of the minutes of the February 1st, 2018 regular meeting of the Plan Commission. Do I have a motion to approve the minutes?
I so motion.
No, second.
Moved Commissioner Gray and seconded Commissioner Curran. Before we move to a vote, any comments, edits, suggestions, etc. for the minutes? Hearing none, all in favor of approving the minutes of the February 1st, 2018 regular meeting, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed, same sign. Motion carries. Minutes are approved. Okay, very first item, only item on our agenda this evening is site plan and minor deviation approval for Maple Grove Planned Unit Development, an amendment of the Brementown PUD. And on the phone this evening, we have Brian, or is it Bryant?
Bryant.
It's Brian Scarborough.
Brian Scarborough. Again, thank you for joining us. From what town are you joining us by phone?
I'm calling from Tiki Island, Texas, which is rural, it's the village of Tiki Island. It's right next to Gallup.
All right. So because you are in what I'm assuming is a much more pleasant environment than we are, we're required to give you a very hard time on this.
No, I hear you. And actually it did. It got really nice today, but it's been kind of miserable. Not as bad as up there, but I spent 10 years in way northern Maine, so I still remember how it was.
All righty. So we're going to, by the way, do you have the opportunity? We are streaming live, so do you happen to be watching us live so you can see?
I'm actually not. I'm out in the parking lot of a restaurant, fixing to go to dinner with my wife and daughter.
Okay.
Okay, we'll be quick.
You're tearing at my heartstrings even more now, so we will move on with the staff report on this item here, and at the appropriate time, we'll move to you if you have any presentation of your own or comments.
Okay, what you have before you this evening is a site plan review, and as part of that, also a minor deviation that will allow for a fence in the front yard for the Bank of America building at 16301 Harlem Avenue. In front of you see a sort of a bird's eye view of the bank, bordered on the north side by 163rd, sorry, and in the dotted line you'll see where the proposed fence is to be. What's interesting, I learned a little bit about this through working with Bryant and Brian, is there was an Automated Teller Machine Security Act back in '89, I believe, and it became effective in '96. And amongst other things, it addressed lighting for ATMs. As a consequence of that, this bank, and Bryant's worked on several banks like this, they have to be brought into compliance on various levels, but the one that impacts us this evening is the lighting levels, needing to get, I think it was to 2-foot candles of a 50-foot clearance all around where the ATMs are. To meet that, if they were to meet that to the strict letter of the law, they would have had to remove the vegetation on the property, and you can see in this photo there's a significant amount of vegetation along the north side of that property. And then we'd also end up with a lot of light spillage on those right-of-ways. So there is a way to work with the regulations and meet the regulations, and one of those was building a fence, 6-foot high fence along the north property line to a certain dimension to make sure it acts sort of as an encumbrance to any possible offender that would address the ATM. Working with staff, we told him that we would need to see an open style fence, and we're all familiar with that, having just gone through our fence regulations. So the zoning in this area, this is part of a PUD, as mentioned before. It was an amendment to the Bremerton PUD. So it's a B4 PUD, adopted in '89, I believe, yes. I believe it was. I think so. But you see the surrounding land uses as part of that office complex to the east and south. Most of us know this is one of our major commercial corridors with a B3 PUD just across the street where the vacant Kmart is. As part of the request, they're looking for the 6-foot open style fence, and that's going to be located about 31 feet from the north property line on 163rd. The front yard requirement for a commercial property in a B4 district is 50 feet. Then obviously that means that this fence is going in their front yard, and we know that's a no-no. However, commercial properties can have up to a 6-foot fence, even though I know we recently went through this in a nice long discussion about residential properties. When you're looking at a PUD, sort of the plus and minuses of a PUD is you don't really have to look at this as a variance of our code. And you know, when we look at strict variances, it takes us into a public hearing process. You have sort of standards you have to prove, certain burdens and hardships that have to be proven. Through the flexibility of PUD, you look at these kinds of things as what we call exceptions. So if you want to consider this and allowing this, it would be considered an exception to the PUD, and it's considered a minor deviation, and all the text is there in your report, what distinguishes a minor versus a substantial. Substantial would push us into a public hearing process like we've done before. Minor does not. Minor has to have your recommendation, but it stops here. In addition, just because we're adding something to the site plan, we're looking at this as a site plan approval too, so that allows us to bring into things like landscaping and so forth as part of our review. In the site plan, this sort of shows you the dimensions and lays it out a little bit cleaner for you. Again, you see it's 31 feet from the north. We don't have to worry about the Harlem Avenue setback because it's 52 feet from Harlem Avenue. So I kind of used a little bit of our graphics to give you an idea of what it looks like. You know, the fence style that they are proposing is called Echelon Majestic by Ameristar. It's an open style black aluminum fence. And in this illustration, you kind of get an idea of what it's like. Quite honestly, going out there, it's going to fade away. I mean, it's probably not going to be noticed by most in just driving by the area. Landscaping wise, they are going to do some trimming up of some of the trees, again, trying to make sure they have clear view into the ATM. All the shrubbery has to be kept at a level of 36 inches. That's not going to be a problem. We've asked them to do some additional landscaping underneath the fence. And then just as part of our code compliance, I want to bring this up to our code, and I'm requesting that they add 2 trees in the parkway so that we meet the code for every 25 feet of public street. That's the illustration you have in your staff report. Lighting, they have already installed all the lighting. I mean, just historically, just so you know, they came in to do these improvements and were not aware that the fence would be an issue, and it was through our review that we told them, hey, you can't put a fence in there, we need to go through this process. So these improvements have already been done as part of an earlier building permit. So the lighting standards, now that if they get the fence, the lighting will meet our code, and we're not going to have an issue with that. So the summary of the open items that they're addressing right now is whether you are approving and are supportive of this idea. We'll look at this as a minor deviation to allow the 6-foot fence in the front yard. I would recommend that you condition it upon the fence that they're speccing in the staff report. And then I'd also like to see those additional trees 25 feet apart. It would also acknowledge that, and I have written that in your recommendation, that all this is incumbent upon the plans that they've submitted and we've approved. So the standards, again, this is just the standards of site plan, not the typical standards that you usually see us do in a public hearing, but I can sort of summarize those, if you will, Chairman. When you look at the site plan, you need to make sure that the uses are all permitted in the district, and that is certainly what it is. That it doesn't have any negative impact on drainage or adjacent land uses, and I think the fact that it's an open style fence accomplishes that. It's not impacting any of the circulation. That's a built environment out there. All those circulation patterns are already established. It does provide some additional security as required by the Security Act. And the landscaping, we're certainly going to get some additional landscaping and improve the landscaping that is out there already. One of the recommendations, I spoke with the chairman prior to the meeting. You have the choice of doing this in one meeting this evening or take 2 meetings. I think it's a fairly minor issue. If you're supportive of these concepts, I think we can be a little business friendly and do this in one meeting if you so agree. And that's it. Thank you.
Excellent. So yes, I would agree that barring any objections from the rest of the commission or the public, I'm comfortable with taking care of this at a single meeting. So that said, Bryant, if you have any additional information to provide or points to emphasize for the commission, this is your opportunity. We'd love to hear from you.
All right. Well, first, thank you very much, Barbara. That was a very good presentation. I don't have very much to add. She covered it very well. We occasionally run into this situation where we have competing or conflicting regulations. I think this is a very good compromise suggested by your staff. Certainly happy to do it. Add some trees, and we're not about making it ugly, we're trying to make it safer. And that's really all I have to add, but I would certainly take a shot at any questions y'all might have.
Okay, so just to clear up, because I think this is what I heard, the recommendations or the requests of staff about the additional trees, that's agreeable, right?
Yes, they have agreed to that.
It's not necessarily an open item at this point, it's agreeable?
Yeah, and I recommended you make that a condition.
Yes.
All right. It's certainly agreeable to us. I'm sure Barbara will provide me with the species and height requirements, and it's our pleasure to plan them.
Okay, great. So,
The width of the
Go ahead.
trees.
I'm sorry.
What's the width of the trees that we'd require them to put in there? The circumference.
The caliber, you mean?
Yeah,
Well, usually the requirement is 2.5 inch caliber.
because those trees there are a lot older,
We could push it up to a 3
like a
if you'd
3 or
like.
3.5. Would that be okay with you guys?
3.5 is
With a-
pretty expensive.
Yeah, 3 or 3.5 inch caliper tree, 2 of them?
Yes, sir.
Okay, thank you. Let me just ask, I got
so
just a
we're
couple
going to
quick
go ahead and go to
questions,
the
yeah.
commissioners. Let's go ahead, Commissioner Cronin.
The Echelon Majestic fence, 6 inch, is that referring to the open spaces between each?
6 foot.
I understand it's 6 foot, but then in
Oh,
open
I
area number
see.
2.
Typo in the report?
You know, that's a typo.
They all- it's
Up
all
above it
6
says
feet.
6 foot, and the
Right.
bottom it says 6 inch.
Okay.
That's my error
Done.
here.
The photo is the actual fence that we're
Yes.
talking about putting in there? I have just one question. How did you guys determine the length of that fence? Obviously, it doesn't go from the entire length of that parking lot there. How'd you determine just that area that you're putting the fence up in?
The designer, that's a great question. I've asked it myself because it varies all the time. So they design it to give like 15 seconds head start. So, or if you're at the ATM and you see somebody you're not, that's scared of, you got about 15 seconds to run head start. That's about the only explanation that he can give me, and how they calculate that, I have no idea. That's the idea, but just to give you a little extra head start to go. We don't want to enclose the area, that actually makes the problem worse, that type of deal, and it's not near as aesthetic, please.
Okay.
Isn't also the radius, the 50-foot radius?
I'm sorry?
I thought it was also the 50-foot radius. If you were to take,
It doesn't block, it blocks the 50-foot radius, and that allows some wiggle room on carrying those lights, the light spillage.
right, but the end of
On our
those,
property and not in the road.
the end of each of those fences is 50 foot from the ATM. So I
Okay.
think it's,
Could you hear that, Brian? Paula said that the end of the fence is about 50 feet from the ATM itself, which is the radius where that came from.
That's right.
Okay.
I'm sure that's part of their calculation, absolutely.
So Commissioner Croner, any additional
Nope.
points at this time? Eddie, down on this side, any questions, Commissioner Wright?
Nope.
Coming down this way, Commissioner Kern?
Just a question as to saying 163rd Street is the front. Could Harlem be considered the front?
they're both are.
Oh, so it's a
they're
double
both front
front.
yards, but
Okay.
it's 52 feet from, that fence is 52 feet from Harlem, so it's not in the front.
Right, I was
yard.
just wondering if it was on Harlem, it automatically would be 52 feet and there wouldn't be the 31 feet, wouldn't matter, I wouldn't think. Yeah, if
Well,
it was
but
a
they
side
have to,
yard.
by the code or the state act, you take that ATM and then you just run 50 feet all the way around it. So here's
Gotcha.
163rd, here's Harlem, and you have to make sure that light at 2-foot candles is going out there. So that would take that light out into the middle of 163rd, and we're supposed to be down to .5
Gotcha.
at that point.
Okay, that's all.
So now they can drop it quicker.
Okay, Commissioner Manning?
No, I just had the same comment, how was the length determined? Because I did read the ATM Security Act, and I didn't really see anything specifying the length of that fence.
Okay,
So, but it looks fine.
great. So I had just a couple of points. Some of them are not necessarily questions, I want to make sure that we're clarifying certain points for the record. And unfortunately, my computer logged itself off here. We don't need to get back on it. I just,
Okay.
in case I go off the rails here, I just want someone to drag me back in because I don't have
We
it in
can
front of me.
get it going. You wanna go Barb?
So, the clarifying what Commissioner Croner mentioned, the 6 foot versus what it says in the report, 6 inch, oh, thank you, excellent. I don't recall, I don't think the suggested motion to approve states that, but just in case it does, make sure we're good.
About the 6 foot?
Yeah, 6 foot, the style.
Yeah, there's a typo. I say erect a 6-inch, it means that, I'm supposed to say erect a 6-foot
Right.
echelon.
Right, it's just-
When we read the motion, we could just correct it.
Yeah.
So you're with me, you got that. So I want to clarify a couple of points here. The trigger for why we're even looking at this, if I understand correctly, is that the bank itself, their compliance group was looking at their own compliance with various regulations and discovered that perhaps they were not in compliance.
Right.
Is that accurate statement there, Brian?
Yes, sir, it is, and in fact, it's 95% of all banks in the U.S. So this is a multi-pronged, all banks are doing this now as well. So they kind of drug their feet and got called out, and now they're scrambling. So we're doing the same thing, the same program with Bank of America's, with Wells Fargo's, Legacy's, et cetera. So
Okay.
yes, sir, it is in response to a delayed reaction to a statute.
Excellent, all right. And so again, following on that point, I believe the staff report stated that this particular bank was built in '89 or in and around there, around the time the act was approved, but it was not effective until 1996,
Yeah, they're late. I mean,
et cetera.
Yeah.
That's right.
But Paula, is it a fair statement to say that short or absent any sort of change the bank was making, as near as we could tell, they were not non-compliant with any village requirements,
no,
right?
right.
So
No, they were
there was
fine.
nothing from the village's side where that that caused the need for any of this.
Correct.
It's, as part of what we discussed potentially for the conditional requirement is just to kind of take the opportunity to get some parkway trees in there that should be there, right? Okay.
It's part of the site plan review.
Yep. And so then compliance with the state statute or anything else is essentially the bank's responsibility. They are otherwise in compliance, as near as we can tell.
Except for the street trees.
I'm sorry, what?
Except for the street trees.
Correct.
Yes.
Okay, so we're good on that point, and I apologize for belaboring that. I just to make sure that we're very clear on why we're doing what we're doing and what it is. Last point really has nothing to do with these guys. It just begs the question, and I think Brian actually answered it on our behalf. What other properties in town can we expect to perhaps be coming to us as they start to try to comply with this? So it's just,
We're not really going to be out there enforcing state and federal law.
Exactly my point. This is compliance with a state statute, not anything with Tinley Park. So,
Right.
Yes,
Okay.
it's a federal statute, I'm not sure.
was that federal? I'm sorry, I thought that said
State and federal.
Okay.
But because we're Illinois, I only cited that one.
Okay.
Brian's working out in California and all over the place.
Great. So I am comfortable with moving forward. It sounds to me like there didn't seem to be any significant questions or objections here. Okay, so with that, before I ask for a motion on this item, Brian, did you have any final statements or questions or comments?
No, just to thank y'all for hearing the petition and especially for allowing me to conference in versus fly all the way there. So thank you.
Excellent. Okay. So at this point, I would like to entertain a motion on this matter. What?
Just to make it, there's no one in objection.
Well, I mean,
It's not a public
It's not a
hearing.
public hearing.
Okay.
But, there's no requirement that we hear from the public on this item, but seeing that there is nobody in attendance, we will move on that. But thank you.
Okay.
Do I have a motion on this matter? Does anyone like to put forth a motion?
Sure, I'll go ahead and make a motion to grant the petitioner Lynn R. Rogers Electrical Contractor on behalf of the Bank of America, site plan approval in accordance with plans as noted in the list of submitted plans within the staff report and attached to the Plan Commission meeting packet for site improvements for the Bank of America located at 16301 Harlem Avenue. These improvements are considered a minor deviation from the approved Maple Grove PUD and amendment to the Brementown PUD and have met the site plan standards as outlined in Section 3.T.2 of the zoning ordinance. This approval includes the following exception: to allow for a 6-foot open-style fence in the front yard with related landscaping improvements, with the following conditions: that they are to erect a 6-foot Echelon Majestic by Amerstar black aluminum fence and install 2 additional street trees of 3.0-inch caliper or larger along 163rd Street.
Second.
Okay, motion Commissioner Croner, second Commissioner Curran. Minor point here, just, in the interest of being business friendly here, looking at potential things that could happen before we move to a vote. I didn't catch earlier that the sample motion was very specific as to not only the manufacturer, but the style of fence. If there's any potential that for some reason they can't do that exact fence, I wouldn't want to force them to have to come back to us because.
Staff can make that kind of
Okay,
determination.
I just want to make sure that we're clear on that point there, that it's.
This is something they spec. This is what they plan on doing.
It's that fence or equivalent, because that's what we're seeing in the report, that's what we're approving. Fair enough? All right, so we don't need to amend the motion or anything. All right, so, motion has been moved and seconded. Go ahead and we don't have to do a roll call vote, but we will.
Gray,
Yes.
Manny,
Yes.
Curran,
Yes.
Croner,
Yes.
Shaw,
Yes.
Gray, oh, I said Gray, sorry.
Okay, motion carries. So,
I don't want to hear about barbecue ribs, though,
I'm sorry?
from Brian. He's waiting outside
He's
a
wait-
restaurant. I don't want to add more misery and let him brag about the ribs he's going to eat.
Yeah.
I was actually expecting a very large care package to be making its way from Texas sometime soon, in time for our next meeting, perhaps.
With our luck, we'll get the grapefruits.
All right.
I want to thank you guys again for your approval and your consideration, and maybe a pile of brisket will show up there.
There you go.
For
You're on air.
Okay, for the record, I will state that I was just kidding.
I know you were.
All right, thanks a bunch for your time. You have a great evening, and I'm now going to hang up on you.
Thank you very much.
All right,
Thank you.
we'll see you. Okay, I think I handled the technical.
He was all ready to fly up here, and I'm like, oh, please don't fly up here for this. I was like,
All right, let the record reflect that we are very business friendly here.
yes, we are.
All right. So, with that, again, computer is by the wayside, but
Sorry.
as far as the agenda goes, I believe our next item is just good of the order. Is that correct?
Sure. Software is still at the top of my list. We had a site visit up in Elk Grove Village early this morning and was very impressed with one of our top candidates. So we have one more site visit tomorrow, and then I have 4 interviews next week. So my sincere hope is that I'm not really that behind in that schedule as we had originally had wanted to do, and probably about a month, because I really wanted to get something going in here while we're having a little bit of our slow permitting time. But I think we'll be just fine, and staff is super excited about getting new software. We're working with Blackstone Loft, that's the Bremen Cash Store property. So as we finalize some of the incentive issues with board members, we'll be beginning the planning entitlement process. So that'll be an exciting project for you all to work on. Also working with Lenny's Food and Wash. That was called?
Car and walk, food.
Food and Wash or something, on Harlem, working on an annexation on that property.
That's on Harlem?
Harlem, south, pretty far south, 194th. Just blew that out of my head. We have a group of properties on Oak Park Avenue, starting at the Vote Building, going on down to like 175th, that we have discovered some horrendous boundary issues, survey issues. So it's been like I don't know, hornet's nest, that's not a good word, but just a mess trying to sort that out. We've had to hire surveyors, so I'm working with all the individual property owners on there to come up with some equitable re-subdivision of that area. So that's been quite interesting.
Is that, without going into too much detail,
Mhm.
is that related to the
Bang and gavel?
boundaries of their own, or related to village right-of-ways, or
Nope,
something?
boundaries of their own. Boundaries of their own. So it's really not our issue, it's a
Right.
civil issue, but we're trying, because you have so many property owners and it's a business issue, I want to make sure that we can facilitate an equitable solution for everyone so we can move ahead. We have some business prospects that are interested in buying some property, and this is holding that up. So from an economic development perspective, we need to get this figured out. So it's taking a lot of time. Still working a lot of text amendments. I've really got some corrections I need to see be made to the legacy code. So working on those, not quite as quickly as I'd like to. Which comes around to staffing. We have an offer that's been accepted by a new planning manager, but waiting for all the background checks to be done. And my hope is to see that appointment be made on March 6th, and this person would then start on March 8th. The senior planning ad closed on February 5th, and I've got several candidates there, very good candidates. So we'll start starting looking at scheduling those interviews the end of next week and the week after. So don't really want to start both those positions right at the same time, so I'm hoping maybe I could get that position going in April. So that would be excellent. So we're keeping busy. The only other thing I just wanted to talk about, and just I know you all are busy, and I would just ask this because it's taking time for us, is the finding out if we have a quorum is continuing to be problematic. And I just would really, really appreciate it if each of you, as soon as you get your packet, if you could just please respond back to us, yes, I'm going to be there or not, because we're taking up a lot of staff time. I mean, Barb's calling and emailing several times to people, and I know we're all super busy, but it's because it gets up to 2 or 3 days ahead, and I'm like, oh, are we going to have a meeting, or are we not going to have a meeting? And that gets, it just makes our lives a little more difficult than it needs to be. So, and I know sometimes your schedules change, but if we could do that, I'd really appreciate it.
That's actually a fair point, and I know several of the commissioners have done this in the past, but to the extent any of us are able to provide their availability, you're going on vacation. I'm going on vacation in June.
I'll take it as soon as you can.
I haven't looked at the actual dates, but I can tell you there's certain dates that.
Well,
I will
case
not
in
be
point,
available.
he's hell-bent on flying, and so he wanted to book his flight. And I couldn't tell him to do that because I didn't know if I had a meeting. So it just made it look bad for me to try to tell him, I don't know if we're going to have a meeting. So that would be very helpful. We have a big board. We should be able to accomplish that.
Yep.
So
I guess the ask in the interim would be, is, to the extent you haven't already done it, try to put in your preliminary availability when you know you're absolutely not available, and then.
yeah, we really need to know every time, because I don't want to rely on, you tell me your vacation is
6
such and
months in
such.
advance, yeah.
So as soon as you get your packet, just as a matter of protocol, if you just would please just let Barb know, and she'll be happy. Very.
Well, perhaps as a matter of just being proactive, whether it's 1 or 2 meetings out, probably wouldn't hurt for us to, instead of being asked, say, I'm going to be at that one. I'm going to be at that one.
Sometimes it changes.
Whatever-
Yeah, I would
works.
just rather her send out, either you take the initiative, but I usually ask her right after the board packet, or the plan commission packet goes out, find out, do we have a quorum, and then if you would just respond to her email, it would be good. That's it.
I'll have to come looking for you.
And you can't hide from Barb.
On the Bremen Cash Store property, is that a restaurant? Going
It
up
is
there?
a 39 mixed-use development with a 5,000 square foot lease space on the first floor that we would hope would be a sit-down restaurant.
Oh, okay. Yeah.
But at least that we know of currently, there's not a commitment from a specific tenant.
No, I'm working with him with some good ideas, but
Okay.
we have no LOIs or anything.
Excellent.
Yeah.
And just the simple name, the working name that we've been going with is Bremen Cash Store.
I know, now, it took me a while, Blackstone Loft.
Yes.
That's
So-
what they want to go by.
So there is there's no intention to have any sort of sub-name or anything, Bremen Cash Store or anything of that nature. So, okay. Be nice. I wouldn't necessarily make it a condition of approval or anything. So,
They aren't officially applied. I mean, this is all, stuff that we're just kind of working on.
Yep.
It will be shortly.
Any other items there specifically? So I would just like to note that the most recent web conference for the Q&A for the Tinley Park Mental Health Center RFQ took place a week ago.
Is it that, seems longer ago, but.
It
yeah.
does seem like it was a lot longer than
It
that.
was just last week, I think.
Yes, it was.
Yeah.
And I did tune in for that.
Yeah,
and,
thank you.
It was well attended, at least.
Yeah,
what
25.
I saw and heard, and that was good. Is that posted already? I know the intention. Okay, so it is out there on the website.
Yes.
Somewhere if people would like to tune in and listen. There's a lot of good information. If you read the RFQ, a lot of what was in the RFQ was covered, but there were some good questions that came in from the folks who attended. So I myself am looking forward to hearing more about how that is proceeding forward.
Is it a new firm that's handling it?
Handling, we just, we have an RFP out that's due on the 23rd. So something I've done with other RFPs, you have sort of a developers forum so that instead of having questions filter in and you still make them available to everyone, it's sort of an opportunity to get everybody in one place at one time and answer these questions. It was also, in my mind, sort of a opportunity to instill some excitement for the project and get a little more advertising about it out there. We did some good media coverage on it, and so there's no, we have, like I said, there was 25 that listened in on the webinar. There's more than that had downloaded the RFP. Anyone's guess how many will actually propose. It's just an RFQ. It's really an RFI, but there was some debate, I guess, at the board. They wanted to call it a RFQ. We just want to see how much interest there is. We don't have ownership of the property, and that's giving pause to some of these people that downloaded the RFQ. But our hopes is that we're going to see some very qualified developers that could take down the property in one fell swoop and have some excellent experience of developing properties of that magnitude. And so that when the state, we want to be in a prime position when the state finishes their last appraisal so that, we can take it to the board and say, otherwise we're going to the board just like we did last time. Hey, do you want to buy this property? Well, the board's being very fiscally prudent. They're saying, well, why would they buy it unless they had some kind of a developer that they know that could take this on? So it's a good process that we're going through.
Good. That's some good background there. It sounds to me like the intent is not necessarily that this is a binding process.
Right.
Whatever the outcome is, it's informational. It's trying to generate interest, trying to build ideas and try to move forward. Right? But it's not necessarily a selection process.
Depending on what the response is, the board could very well select a developer, a preferred developer that they want to work with.
Okay. Good. Any other questions, comments? Great.
Okay. Thank you.
Any public comment? Hearing none, I'd entertain a motion to close this evening's meeting.
I so motion.
Second.
Commissioner Gray, second Commissioner Manny, all in favor say aye.
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 Opposed, same sign. Motion is adjourned, our meeting is adjourned. Thank you.
Good job.